All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ClearCom Digital Party Line and IP Intercom Solutions webinar presented by TC Furlong. We're happy that everyone can be with us today. Before we get started, I'd like to make some quick introductions. So first off, I'm Brian Grahn with the TC Furlong Sales and Marketing team. For those not familiar, TC Furlong is a Chicago area-based live sound company. We handle equipment sales and rentals, live event production, handful of other services, including system design, repairs, and more. As a rental provider, we have historically had Encore analog party line systems and enjoyed the ease of use of FreeSpeak 2. But today we wanted to talk more about the digital party line and IP solutions, specifically HelixNet, LQ series, and Agent IC. There's a lot of great features in these product lines, and especially pertaining to remote production communications these days. Today, we are joined by Frank Linton and Vic Lombardi from ClearCom. How is everyone?
Good. Good afternoon.
Also, a special thanks to Mo Paulson with Spoiled by Technologies for helping put this all together as well. Hey, Mo.
Hey, thank you.
All right. Before we dive into this, I do have some housekeeping. We're recording today's webinar. We're going to post it later on our YouTube page. We'll make sure that we send a link out to all registrants once that is posted. We're not going to be monitoring the chat section of today's webinar for questions. If you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A feature on Zoom. And we have a planned Q&A portion towards the end of the webinar today, but also please submit your questions as we go. We can prioritize some questions over the course of the webinar today as well. So with that said, let's jump right in. I think we're going to start, throw it over to you, Vic.
Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon to everybody. And again, thanks to TC Furlong for the opportunity. Like Brian was saying, I'm going to give you just a brief overview of HelixNet and LQ as standalone systems. And then Frank's going to be covering linking for real-world applications. So as we go, please feel free to type in questions. We'd love for you to drive the conversation. And to start off, I would like, let's test out those Q&A, or the keyboards, the Q&A function of Zoom. I'd like to give away a coffee tumbler and a power bank phone charger for whoever can tell me what year did ClearCom open for business? So while you're Wikipedia searching that and feverishly typing in your Q&A feature, I'll just give you a brief history. So Charlie Button was the front of house engineer at the Avalon Ballroom in San Francisco many years ago. And bands were packing it out, like the Grateful Dead, Janis Joplin, the Doors were packing it out so much that they couldn't get the runners through anymore. So he couldn't communicate the backstage crew. So what he did is he developed a circuit that would allow him to talk to the folks backstage and tell them to turn up the snare, raise the curtain, whatever it was. So that was the invention of production party line communications. And that happened in the year of 1968 when ClearCom was founded. So we'll let Matt and Brian tell us who won. We'll make sure to get those prizes out to wherever you need them to go. But in 1968, that is Charlie Button's story, and he invented analog party line ClearCom. Fast forward 52 years, and now we have HelixNet, digital analog or digital party line systems that allow all 12 to 24 channels to run down one XLR or Cat5 cable. It's capable of supporting user stations connected over traditional XLR audio cables and Ethernet networks at the same time. So it's ones and zeros running down the cable. It doesn't care if it's going by a power generator, a dimmer rack, a video wall. There's no interference. There's no noise. There's no nulling needed. So who's using this technology is anybody that's looking for an IP-based solution using a local area or wide area network. And the reason is the auto discovery at the endpoints. So there's no typing in of IP addresses. It's easy to set up, and the programming is easy with the core configuration manager. We have a browser-based GUI, high channel count. Like I said, there's no noise and no nulling. So the main station itself, it's a 4-channel user station with 4 open module slots on the back. I'm not going to go too deep into the hardware, but the module options are 2-wire, 4-wire, and our Ethernet ET2 module. So that Ethernet module gives you the access to the CCM system control. It also allows you to connect network switches over Cat5 that can power up HelixNet belt packs or remote station using PoE. So auto discovery, no typing in of the IP addresses. If you have a HelixNet base and you're wanting to set up a quick tech table, you can run a Cat5 cable out to a network switch, drop your belt packs, all the channels show up there, and you're ready to go. So that's the HelixNet in a nutshell. Moving on to LQ. So LQ is comms over IP, and that can be used as a standalone system as well. So it comes in a rack mount or a portable version, 2-wire, 4-wire GPIO configurations. You can link up to 6 boxes together. Each LQ can host 8 SIP and up to 8 Agent IC licenses. So those licenses live on that box. Agent IC is a free downloadable app from Apple iTunes or Google Play Store. And those licenses then connect to that LQ box over 3, 4, 5G, LTE, or Wi-Fi. It is important to know that that 2-wire version of the LQ will power up wired belt packs. So an example of that was if you have an LQ in a football field press box, and another one in your video control room, you can link those over IP, and that would connect all the wireless and wired users on the LQ system. So that's a real basic overview of HelixNet and LQ. So now we'll bring in Frank to kind of discuss some of the applications and press some of the buttons. Frank?
Hey, so hopefully everyone can hear me. So just to cover a little bit about HelixNet and how it kind of came about, the idea was not to replace our analog Partyline system. It was to enrich it. I've been lucky enough to be around with ClearCom long enough when I was here during the release date. When we released it, we did everything over Powerline, and talk a little bit about Powerline so everyone kind of has an idea how we're actually getting 12 or 24 channels of IP communication or Partyline communication over a 3-pin XLR. This goes back to the early days of internet, and I kind of laugh about this because I was actually looking at one of these for my son recently. Before we had Wi-Fi, the only way to really get high-speed internet from one room of your house to another was to run a cable. Well, a company figured out that you could actually take a box and plug it into your home power outlet, and it would actually superimpose RF on top of your home power, and that was called Powerline. Then you could plug another box in somewhere else, and then you had high-speed internet in another room, and you'd have to run a cable from one spot to the other. So the Powerline ports on the actual back of the HelixNet, that's exactly what we're doing. We're actually using a potential of 59-volt cable, and then what we're doing is we're sending a digital signal or an RF signal on top of that. It is IP, so each belt pack is an IP belt pack if it connects over the power line, and that gives them the, say, 12 or 24 channels. Why do we keep saying 12 or 24 channels of Partyline? That's because the base station comes as a default with 12 party. Wow, learned to talk today. Has a default of 12 party lines, and you can always add a license to it to get another 12 if you needed up to 24 channels of party lines off of a single base station. So that's all off of one base station inside the system. Configuring of the system is done mostly through the web interface. So to show you what that's going to kind of look like, make sure I have this right. So what I've logged into right now, I've already logged into my systems, is I have an LQ and a HelixNet. So if this is my overview page, this is going to let me see what devices I have in my system. So I have a HelixNet main station. Let me see if I can actually make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. So I have a HelixNet main station. We call that our link master inside our system. So we try to make linking of these devices as simple as possible. And what I mean by that is we actually just have to designate one device as what we call a link master, and that's designated by the LM. The other devices are just going to be called link members. Those link masters and link members just have to talk to each other over a simple connection. And all you do is you tell the link members the link master's IP address, and they're going to be linked together. So just real quick to show you what that's going to look like in the web interface. I'm going to be in the device page. I want to look at my HelixNet main station. So I'm going to hit this little cogwheel right here. This takes me to the device page. And then I just want to go to linking. For the link master, all I have to do is say that it is a link master. That's it. That's as hard as setting it up on the link master side goes. Then if I want to look at the other device, I already have this linked. So I'm just going to hit this little drop-down menu, go to LQ, go again to my linking page. I designate my LQ as the link member and then tell it the link master's IP. And as long as the two devices can talk to each other through the IP network, they're going to be able to link together. Now they're basically one system linked together. That's why I only have one web interface open for these, is because now they're acting as one big system. On my right now, I have this as my HelixNet main station is the bottom device, and then my LQ sitting kind of on top. My FreeSpeak 2 is kind of in the middle right now. But these devices don't even have to be co-located together. You could now have your HelixNet main station sitting front of house. And say you want to integrate into your analog party line system, and that power supply or main station was in a server room or a rack room somewhere. I just have to have the LQ there, and then that way I can link the two together and have everything set up and ready to go. Usually get asked what ports that we have that are going to be open to allow these two to link together. One of them is going to be port 80. So if you're not familiar with a lot of the IP ports, port 80 is the web interface. So the web interface between the HelixNet main station and the LQ have to talk to each other. And then we're going to use port 6001, and it's a UDP and TCP connection. So these two boxes are talking over two IP ports to each other, and that allows us to link together. So that's it. That's as simple as it is, or let me rephrase that. That's as hard as it is to get everything to link together. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be difficult. Usually the only time we run into any issues is if you are trying to talk out of one network to the other, and we just have to open some ports. And again, those are that port 80 and port 6001. As you go through and you're looking at the web interface, a lot of the nice things that we have here for the HelixNet system is we have roles. So if you're used to our FreeSpeak 2 system, you're used to our roles. Roles are predefined user settings. So they're going to find what channels devices get to talk and listen to, and they're also going to set the device settings. So if you send a call signal to a belt pack, do you want that belt pack to vibrate? Do you want them to be able to have the talk and listens? So all of that information is going to be there. So there is a question. It says, is there any chance of using port 443? Yes, there is. We do have the ability to set this to go to secure. So for the people who are asking the question, port 80 is the open IP address. If you think of 443, that's when you go and you have usually the lock on your Internet Explorer to let you know that you're in a secure area. Yes, we can use 443. So, okay. So again, our roles inside the system allow us to define what you're going to be using. This also allows you to pre-configure the system beforehand. So all you need is a main station. You hook up to the main station. Unfortunately, there is no offline editor currently. But right now you do have to hook up to the main station. You can log in and set up all of your individual roles for your belt packs, your user stations, things like that. Then when you get on site, you just plug everything in. When it connects back to the main station, all you have to do is select the role and you're up and running and you're ready to go. So it allows for a very versatile and very easy system. If you are connecting over Powerline, you can daisy chain devices like you did before. If you're connecting over PoE or network switches, there is no daisy chaining. You do have to directly connect to that. So the best way I tell people is think of your network switch at that point in time as your patch panel that you'd have before for your Partyline systems. Okay. Question is, will there ever be an offline editor? I'm hoping. I wish I had an answer for that one, and I wish that answer was yes. But currently, I don't have any information of a roadmap saying that we do have anything coming out, so I do apologize on that one. You would still have to have a main station to at least do the configuration beforehand. So if there is anything coming out, I do recommend if you go to clearcom.com, we do have an area to sign up for firmware and software updates and information. You'll get an email letting you know if anything's coming out. If that's the best way to find out if we are doing anything new like that, we will send out email blasts. And you usually get an email about once a month from there if you do sign up for it. before I go too far into it, one of our hopes today is that you guys have some questions about applications. If you do have an application question, I'd love to answer them. I can ramble on for hours. Trust me, I'm good at it. But if you do have a specific question that you'd like to ask answered, please type it in the chat window. I'll do my best to answer them. If I don't know the answer, I'll let you know, but we will get you the answer after the webinar. Just as a note so I'm showing HelixNet and LQ linked together. One of the things that I like to point out about the LQ series specifically is LQ does not mean it has to work with ClearCom. In fact, LQs are this great universal bridge that allow you to link to a ClearCom system, an RTS system, even a Readle system if you need to. So if you're working and you say you're going to a venue, you could actually give somebody an LQ box. They'll be able to link either 2-wire or 4-wire to any type of intercom system. You have your LQ box on the other side, and now you've linked comms together. So instead of having to run a snake out there with multi-channels, that can help ease a lot of your setup and configuration into things. Again, going back to talking about linking together, I do have my 2 boxes linked together. Once they're linked together, like I said in the configuration, they are one system. So I'm on my assignments page. My assignments page here inside of our CCM is going to allow us to define what our roles are, not our roles, sorry, our channels are. Now, in ClearCom world, if you ever hear us say channels, they're party lines. The reason that we actually call them channels is because it's an individual party line channel. So the term is still going to be a party line. There's still going to be full duplex communication. One of the big advantages you are going to have in the digital system versus the analog is you can actually set a user up, though, as just a listener. So as you're defining the role and as you're setting up the belt pack, if you want somebody to monitor a party line but never talk to it, all we have to do is, one, I'm going to change the name of one of my party lines right now. So right now I have a channel 1 party line, and I don't want that to be channel 1 anymore. I actually want that to be production. So to do that, I just highlight here. I'm going to change this to production, if I could type. So I hit production, and now that's changed inside the system. So I take a closer look at my devices. Now you can see my HelixNet system, oops, way down here at the bottom, is going to production versus channel 1. So everything you do in the CCM or the web interface is going to be a live change. What I've also done is I've linked my channel A and B ports of my LQ. So my top box here, my LQ, those are linked to that production party line. And this actual 701 analog party line belt pack is actually running off of this LQ. Vic kind of mentioned it earlier. 2-port or 2-wire LQs can provide power to belt packs. So this one's actually powering this belt pack for me. And one of the things I've done is I've already linked all my channels together. So now when I hit a call signal on one device, you're going to see that cascading across all the systems. Just by linking everything together, it allows me to have those call signals throughout. So that's one of the nice things that we have here. The other thing we want to talk about a little bit is Agent IC. Agent IC, again, is an app that goes on iOS or Android devices. So this allows you to have a user station on your phone or tablet. To set that up inside of the system, all you have to do is come to your accounts page. As a quick note, there is a license that is involved in this. So to find that license, to find out if your device has it, go to your LQ's device page. So I hit devices here. I'm looking at my LQ, and then we want to look at my license. Here I have 8 Agent IC users and then 8 SIP licenses. So what does it mean to have 8 Agent IC licenses? It means that I can have 8 concurrent people logged in at one time. You can have more accounts than 8. So say you had a morning crew and you wanted them to use the system, you could have 8 accounts for them. And then you had an evening crew or an evening shift, you could have 8 accounts for them, giving them different login and access. But only 8 of them will be able to log in at one time. So that's what that license actually means, is you only get 8 that could log in or more. So as we look at this, I have my tablet right here. It is logged in. I know I'm kind of small on this one, but my tablet is logged here, and I've had that set up. To do that, again, I went to my accounts page. If I can find my cursor, there we go, accounts page. And I gave myself a label. The label just lets me have an identifier inside the system. I give it a username. The username must be at least 3 characters long, and it is cap sensitive. If you like to give it a password, you can. You don't have to give it a password. If you're lazy like me and you don't like to type passwords, You don't have to, but you can put that in there. So let's, there is a question, and it says, is SIP part of the Agent IC license? No, it's a separate license for the system. So the device can be licensed to have up to 8 Agent IC and up to 8 SIP, and you can do both together if you want to. So if you're not familiar with the differences between the two, Agent IC is the app. SIP is actually just a telephone interface for that. So LQ can also allow you to have somebody, if you just want them to call in with a phone number, they're only going to have access to a single party line at that time, and their mic is always going to be on. There's no way to kind of mute them unless they mute themselves on their end. But there is a separate license for that one. So my box just happened to have both of them for my demo purposes. But if you just wanted to license it for 8 Agent IC, you could do that as well. So again, I've gone in and I've set up my username, my password, and then if you look, it says default role. If you like to lock somebody's role, just like you could in any other system, you don't want them to use a different role, you can lock that if you want. If not, you can leave it to default, and that'll allow them to use anyone inside the system. And then lastly, it says LQ any. I always recommend leaving this to LQ any unless you're really specifically locking something down. Now, this only really becomes important if you have multiple LQs linked together. When it's set to LQ any, that means that you can use any LQ's IP address to log in. So if you had 3 LQs, all of them had a license, you could use any of their IP addresses to log in. So if the first one was full with its 8 licenses, you could point this one at the second LQ and start using their licenses that way. If you set it to a specific LQ, it means that they must log in with the IP address of that LQ. So that's why we usually recommend to leave it to any. Okay. Once you have that set on the device, I apologize, I don't really have a tight angle of this one. All you have to do is go inside the app and then type in the username, password, and then the IP address of the LQ. That's pretty simple. Once you do that, hit log in, and it's going to take you to whatever you have set up for your Agent IC role. So I'm going to go here to roles again, look at Agent IC, and I look at my default role, and what I have is these 6 channels of party line. Nice thing about Agent IC is you can actually have it be a 12 or 24 channel user station. So if you did have somebody who needed to talk to all 24 party lines or listen or monitor all 24, if you licensed your HelixNet that way, you could actually give them an Agent IC license, and then therefore they could log in and talk and listen to all of them and have full functionality over comms. So that gives you a lot of flexibility inside the system. Talking about that though, as we kind of look through the systems, if you notice our HelixNet main station is only a 4-channel user station. Let's see, question. Is there a desktop app for Agent IC? I'm going to call on Vic to answer that one. Just give myself a break for talking for a second.
Well, the answer is it's coming soon. So yes, it's definitely in the works. It's a desktop version, and it's coming soon. It's definitely in the works. It should be here early next year.
That's great.
So currently there's not, but we do have one. That's a nice one to part is. I always like Sale to answer that question before I say something. I get myself in trouble. So thank you, Vic, on that one. So yes, there is going to be a desktop station coming at one point in time. It won't actually be called Agent IC. They're actually calling it something else of that, but it will be able.
Frank, it looks like we might have lost your mic there.
Oh,
there you
Oh, you're back.
go. You're back.
Okay, sorry about that. All right. So going back to what I was talking about before is, again, the Agent IC station is going to allow you to have 12 or 24 channels that you could put onto a single station. What if you wanted to have somebody who was sitting in front of hard panels and you wanted to give them more than 4 party lines? How would you do that? So one of the things that we can do with our main stations and our remote stations for HelixNet is something called expansion panel mode. So if you had a user who needed to talk and listen to more than 4 party lines, you could take a main station or a remote station. We're going to put it as a host. And then you're going to take another one that's connected over IP. And this is important. It must be connected over IP. This is not a power line feature. This is the only thing that you really can't do if you're just using power line devices. This must be connected over IP. And then you're going to set this to be expand to host. The expand to host feature is basically going to link the two together and it's going to make it an 8-key panel. And that allows the user to only use a single headset or gooseneck mic and speaker. So it links them together. And you can do that up to 5 times to a single host, that giving you the ability to have all 24 channels if you wanted to, so you could have a 6R of a user. So if you did have somebody who needs to have more than that, we can do that with our main stations and our remote stations. You can stack those together. Going on, so is there any questions, any application questions or anything like that? Again, I can ramble if I need to. That's really kind of the basics behind the system. Usually you get asked the question, how do I get into advanced features? How do I dive into farther and get into like the really hardcore stuff for these systems? And the truth is there really isn't any, and it's not in a bad way. We've designed these systems to be so robust, but so easy to use that everything is straightforward. Everything is up front. You don't really have to be this tech whiz expert. If you ever use a matrix system, I mean, you get into like just rabbit holes of how to do things. With HelixNet, LQ, and even the FreeSpeak 2 base station, they allow anyone to be an expert without having to be just, know every little minutia of everything. We've made everything kind of point and click. And if you look at our web interfaces, that's hopefully pretty explanatory. If you want to change the name of the party lines, you just go to the assignments page. Assignments page allows us to do that. We also route our 2-wire and 4-wire ports here. You want to make a role, go to the roles page. Break out the individual devices, set up the roles for them. And then the device page just allows us to look at unique things that we have for each device. Just as a quick note, when we talk about HelixNet too, while I'm on this page and I kind of looked at it, and it shows me my firmware version. So if I look at my HelixNet firmware versions really quick, the way that HelixNet works is any HelixNet device that's connected to a main station is brought to a firmware version of the main station. Now, typically that means upgrade, but sometimes that doesn't. So the question is, how do you implement, and we do have a question real quick before I get back to what I was doing, is how do you implement a redundancy with the systems with third-party switches? Does ClearCom recommend a specific switcher HelixNet application? So currently we don't really have a way to go from, so if you think of an analog party line, if you lost one of your power supplies, one would take over for the other one. HelixNet currently doesn't have that in our systems. The only thing you could really do is have a second HelixNet main station with all of the roles and everything pre-programmed and configured into it. Then you'd physically have to go move the networking cables or power line cables over to get that to work. When it comes to network switches, we really don't have any specific ones that we recommend. We do have spec sheets to tell you the minimum requirements for switches that we would like to see. Those, if you go to clearcom.com, go to support and then solution finder, that has all that information there. Let's see. Question is, Yep.
Yeah, we got another one about hooking up multiple venues. So
okay.
The question here is, for combined intercom, would you need to connect LQ to LQ, or I guess another question is, can you integrate LQ into the HelixNet base stations themselves as well?
So it's yes in both answers. So if you do have a HelixNet main station, you can link them to the HelixNet to the LQ like I've done here. Have your HelixNet in your venue and then your LQ in your separate venue. You can definitely do that. If you're doing 2 analog party line systems, you could have 2 LQs and they could link across 2 networks as well. LQs can be 2-wire or 4-wire. They don't have to match each other. So I could have linked to a 2-wire system and then go out 4-wire to another system. So it's however you like to link it that way. So if you have a system and you wanted to have a remote venue and they had an analog party line system, ClearCom, RTS, whoever, you could give them a 2-wire box and then they could link over IP. If you were an analog system and they're an analog system, you could go LQ to LQ. Okay. Hopefully that made. All right. So going back to the firmware versions, again, anything that you link over IP or power line, so belt packs, remote stations, speaker stations to the HelixNet main station are going to be brought to the firmware version of the main station. This is important to note because when you plug it in, it doesn't ask, do you want this to happen? it just starts. So if you have somebody to grab a belt pack, it hasn't been plugged in a while, you've upgraded your system, they're just going to see on the belt pack it says erasing, and then it's going to go through verifying and uploading. That's fine, just leave it, let it run. The rest of the system will work perfectly fine, but just note that. But again, say you bought a belt pack from our factory, we're always going to ship it out in the latest version. If your base station is running an older version, when you plug it into it, it will downgrade the belt pack to your system. The reason that we did that is because we want all the devices on the same firmware version, so everything works as seamlessly as possible. So upgrades for the HelixNet are free on our website. So you can download those for free. Again, if you sign up for the software updates, they'll let you know about those. So, okay. Just a real quick, usually, if that's kind of the high level techie things about the systems. One of the nice things we can do is we can bring in and incorporate wireless. So HelixNet and LQ, if you think about them, they're really going to be kind of more for wired intercom. Yes, you can do Agent IC, that's kind of a wireless type thing, but how would I integrate in my FreeSpeak 2 system? It's usually one of the popular questions, again, that we have. And the answer to that is it's always going to be analog audio. FreeSpeak 2 does not talk IP to any of the devices, so it's going to be an analog audio connection to that. And then how you do that is going to depend upon the number of channels that you want to share between FreeSpeak 2 and HelixNet. So if I wanted to go to my HelixNet system from FreeSpeak 2, and I'm just doing, say, 2 channels of audio, I would put a 4-wire module inside my HelixNet main station, go 4-wire from my HelixNet to my FreeSpeak 2. If I was doing 4 channels, I could do the same thing. Anything beyond 4 channels, you do want to go to an LQ, because the LQs, we do make one, it's called an LQR 4W2, 4W4, which gives you 4 ports of 2-wire, 4 ports of 4-wire. And then that basically matches to what you have on the FreeSpeak 2 system, and that would allow you to have up to 8 channels of audio shared between the two. That's kind of the maximum port count that we could do sharing audio. And again, the FreeSpeak 2 base 2 only allows you to do analog audio connections. Let's see, question, is it risky to associate, sorry, I'm trying to read this from a distance.
No, you're all right. It's a risk associated to unplugging the belt pack while it's upgrading firmware.
So luckily, no. We do have 2 versions of code that's on there. The base code never really gets updated. It does from time to time, but it's done in a different fashion. So if someone plugs in the belt pack and they're about halfway through the upgrade and they decided to unplug it, it's fine, just plug it back in. You may get to a point with an IP device that it gets to the point where it won't reconnect over IP. All you'd have to do is take it back to the base station, plug in over Powerline, and that would actually finish the upgrade for you. So it's not ideal, obviously, to kill it in the middle of the upgrade, but what we're doing is when we write the application to it originally, we're writing that into volatile memory. And then once it's in volatile memory, we push it into the actual BIOS of it. So that way, when it boots up, it takes it. But yeah, if you're in the middle of the process, you unplug it, it will start back up again. If for some reason that doesn't happen, you can contact our support department. We will tell you how to use a USB recovery to get the firmware reloaded into the system. But that's very, very rare. All right. Any questions on anything that I've covered? Anybody, Vic, anybody else have anything that you'd like me to cover specifically while we're going through anything?
Frank, can you touch on connecting HelixNet through an LQ box through network switches and powering up belt packs in like a secondary church or a regional church?
Sure. So it's a very simple process. So say you take your HelixNet main station. On the back of the HelixNet main station, when you have the Ethernet module, you will have the ability to, I'm actually do stop sharing really quick so you can actually see me. So if you have your HelixNet main station and you are going to be connecting over your IP network, on your Ethernet module, you do have 2 Ethernet ports. Just as a note, these Ethernet ports are not redundant. They are actually pass-through Ethernet ports. So you only want to connect one to your network. The other one is kind of there for either a maintenance port, or what I've actually done today is I've daisy chained all my devices together so I didn't have to have a switch between them. So you take your HelixNet main station, we're going to connect that to your actual IP network. Then what we would traditionally like, and the easiest way to do that, is have a VPN tunnel between your one church or your one location to the next one. Plug in your HelixNet belt pack into the same network or VPN. And when it boots up, you can actually find the device. We actually allow you to pair by two different methods. One is pairing by IP address, where you type in the IP address of the HelixNet main station. The other one is actually called pair by name. The pair by name feature just basically, as long as you're on the same subnet, will pop up and it shows the HelixNet main station. You click that. And then now when you're paired by name, if for some reason your main station booted up and it pulled a different IP, the device will automatically reconnect. If you pair by IP address, for some reason the IP address changed, then you lose connection. You have to go to the devices and reconnect. But it's just by simply having that VPN access between the two different areas, that's going to allow us to connect. And that is one of the things we do have to have.
I think we lost you again there, Frank. There you go.
Okay, apologize. I don't know what's going on. I'm actually going to real quick step off. I'm going to grab a handheld mic so I can make sure they stay on really quick.
Yeah, so what I could do is show, Matt, can I share my screen real quick? Just to show a drawing of that. What Frank was kind of discussing. So that is possible to have a HelixNet base with your LQ plugged into a network switch, connecting to other network switch at a remote location through a VPN, and power up belt packs as well. I think maybe a question earlier was how to, if you needed two LQ boxes to connect remote locations. Well, the answer is yes and no. You can certainly run it this way as well, but there are network requirements for it.
Great. And Vic, maybe you can help with this one. Shelton asked, can you use LQ for adapting 2 to 4 wire automatically, or do you need to have do you need to choose that on the GUI? Like, is that something that's native to the box to plug and play?
That is plug and play. Like it comes with 2 wire and 4 wire ports. It doesn't matter what brand, whatever you're plugging in, it converts to IP.
So if you do have an LQ, just hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm back on this one. So if you do have the LQ and it does have 2 wire and 4 wire ports, yes, you can just plug them in. You will have to go in the web interface and associate the two the 2 ports together. So you will have to say port A and then port E would be associated together in that instance, because A, B, C, D, and then you have your other 4 ports. So yes, you would have to just go into the web interface, just briefly associate them, and then you wouldn't have to go back in there. So, but yes, you can use an LQ as a 2 wire to 4 wire converter in a local box if you wanted to.
Got another question here from Thomas. Since HelixNet belt packs don't have COM in and through XLR ports, like an analog COM, can you simply use a split, like a split 6, to distribute power?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can use a split 6. In fact, I have one probably right over behind me right there. You can use a split 6, or we make a cable. It's called a YC36 that would allow you to split as well. So if you didn't want a daisy chain, you would just have to have a Y beforehand. But yes, you can daisy chain them, or you could use a split 6 if you want.
That's great.
Okay. So, wow, I thought I'd have a lot to say, and you asked the guys I was saying before, and I could talk for hours. I can. I just kind of lost everything to say.
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the advanced features, which I say advanced is kind of a joke, but let's talk about GPIO on HelixNet or FreeSpeak. I know one of the cool things you guys were talking about before is connecting 2-way radio systems, for instance, directly to HelixNet or FreeSpeak. Can you walk us through that, Frank?
Sure. And just to give you an application theory behind this one is we deal a lot with the churches, and more and more with churches, it's sad to say kind of for me, is you do have to have security for them. So if you wanted to integrate, say, the 2-way radios that security officers are using into the intercom, we can go ahead and link those and have it so that you can actually do the PTT from your intercom system or the push to talk to activate the radio. And this saves time, because that way somebody who's now monitoring the radio could be just listening to one headset. And if there's an emergency or something happens, now I use that as an application theory. One of the other ones that we use it for is parking attendants. You can actually have them on the radios as well. If you're working in, say, a theater and you do have intermissions, you could actually have the ushers linked in. So you could say like, hey, we're about to go back into show, start bringing everybody into their seats. So there's a tons of applications into bringing in the two-way radio. The first step is obviously getting in the analog audio. That's nice because FreeSpeak 2 and HelixNet and our LQs all just need a 4-wire. So as long as you have a 4-wire connection open, that's going to be our audio connection to the devices. And then to actually set up the GPO, or the general purpose output, which is just a relay closure, just a real quick inside of FreeSpeak 2. So this is our FreeSpeak 2 UI. Let me bring this in tighter a little well. So inside of here, this is as simple as it gets. We select, I want to use GPO number 1, general purpose output number 1. I hit my green plus and I say that I want anybody who talks on channel 1 to talk on it is going to activate the relay. So if I press my talk button on my FreeSpeak 2 belt pack, inside the web interface, you can see that I get a little green indication to let me know the relay is closed. That, when I connect it to the two-way radio, would actually activate the PTT, and then they'd be able to transmit and talk to the walkie-talkies. Now, say you didn't want everybody on a FreeSpeak 2 system to have that capability. I could simply just go to another relay, or just take this one out. And what I can actually say is just belt pack number 1 is going to be able to activate that relay. Now what I've done is I've allowed everybody else who's listening to channel number 1 monitor the comms, but only belt pack number 1 is going to be able to PTT to it. So that gives you a lot of functionality inside the system. When we go to the HelixNet side, so switching over to HelixNet, I am going to be looking at the main station. So if I go here to I need to go to roles. I look at my main station role, and I want to go down to my GPOs here, or my general purpose outputs again. And then we have a couple of different things that we can do here. I can do this as a local key. Now, local key means only the HelixNet main station is going to have the ability to latch it. So I say talk key number 1 on the HelixNet main station. When it's pressed, we'll fire the relay. I could say it's on the call key, or I could use it as the stage announce key if I wanted to. Or again, I can say it's detect on talk on any of the party lines, or again, detect on call. If you do detect on call, one of the things that you would have to do is press the talk key and then press the call button to get that to work. We do have a new feature that's actually in our latest firmware update of HelixNet, which is call on talk, which means that when you press the talk button, it activates the call relay, and then that way you wouldn't have to hit both those buttons. But it does allow you to activate that in multiple different fashions, because you never want to have your radio PTT'd for a long period of time, because you could actually burn out the transmitter. So, but again, that's one of the ways that we can kind of link into two-way radios, which allows you to expand the capability of the system. Just as a note, two-way radios are still going to be simplex audio. We can't fix that on our side. You'll be able to listen, you'll be able to talk at the same time, but the two-way radio is only going to be able to do one of the functionalities. So
I've had stage managers thank me for that functionality to get that walkie-talkie, that radio off of their hip, so they can just integrate it right into their belt pack. Hey, Frank, can you touch on the connectivity of fly packs to wirelessly to control rooms?
Sure. So actually what I kind of have set up here in front of me, it was actually this kind of configuration is inspired by a fly pack that was actually done by a broadcast TV station. They actually had a rack mount version of the LQ, but they basically took an LQ, a FreeSpeak 2, and a HelixNet together, and then they linked them back to their TV station. So the backhaul of that is all done by the LQ. This kind of goes into 2 different linkings into the system. You can have the LQ talk to a ClearCom matrix via our IP card if you like to. So that's another functionality. So if you are getting into a bigger system, one of the nice things about all of our systems is they will be able to communicate with each other. So you could have this as your remote setup, and then link to our big matrix style system, or you could talk back to another LQ inside the system, and that allows you to have, again, multiple channels. LQ to LQ linking, all of them are going to be, you're going to have access to all the channels. You can link up to, again, 6 LQs together. If you're linking LQ by IP to a HelixNet main station, you are limited to 3 LQs. That is one of the kind of limitations that we have there. The reason that we limited that to 3 LQs is because if you think of our HelixNet main station, you have up to 12 or 24 channels. We have a rack mount version of the LQ, which is 8 ports, 8, 16, 24. That gives you 24 IOs for your system. So that's how that number came about. But yes, this is kind of a fly pack setup. Obviously, you'd have your wireless belt packs. I have my transceiver kind of sitting off to the side here for my FreeSpeak 2 system. I do have an analog system. This is nice. I have an analog belt pack set up right here. But say you needed a Talent IFB, we have a little thing called a TR50. The TR50 can run off this 2-wire LQ. That gives an in-ear device for the Talent to listen to their IFB controls if they needed to, if you're going to go down that route. And then you have your HelixNet system, which gives you a nice wired intercom system. So that's one of the nice advantages. So that gives you a nice 3RU fly pack that allows you to have up to 25 wireless and then up to 80 wired devices inside the system.
That's great. I want to open it up to see if anyone else has additional questions here. We're kind of getting a little later in the webinar, but feel free, anyone, please submit your questions through the Q&A. I've got, oh, go ahead, Frank. Sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So actually, I did want to point out, is we were talking about this one. It's actually kind of funny, is when we actually came out with HelixNet. So I have my HelixNet belt pack here, and I have an analog belt pack here. Is if you were used to an analog system, you actually have like an analog party line fatigue when you've been on a party line all day long. You have that background noise, that hum that's just inherited because you have a 30 volts running down the same line as your system. And actually, a lot of people use that to know if their belt pack is actually connected. When we actually came out with the HelixNet system, we got a lot of phone calls to our tech support. People thought that their belt packs were broken because if no one's talking, it's dead quiet. And the reason that it's dead quiet is because it's IP. So no packets are being sent inside the system. And that's, again, one of the nice features about the HelixNet system is you don't have that fatigue of listening to that 2-wire buzz all the time. Don't get me wrong. I love the 2-wire systems. They're great. They're just going to work. And I'm going to tell you the truth. HelixNet is just going to work. But it is nice because, again, you don't have that background noise, that hum. It is digital. So therefore, it is nice for the crew, especially if you're working, say, a 12-hour day. You're not having to sit there and listen to that background noise. So.
I've got a question for you, Frank.
Yeah.
Can you route a channel of comm to the stage announce to always be converting as an output, or does it have to be triggered by a stage announce?
So
button?
for on the HelixNet, is that on the HelixNet side?
HelixNet.
Okay. So it depends if it's a main station or a remote station. So if we look at our web interface for the CCMs, when we look at the main stations, stage announce options are very limited. You can look here. It just says I have option to make it latching or non-latching. If you needed to have that where you wanted something always going to a stage announce out port and you have a HelixNet remote station, when we look at its role, you actually have 2 modes of operation. One is stage announce, which means you do have to press the button. The other one is channel assignment. And when you select it to channel assignment, now on the bottom, we can associate that to a channel. And anything said on that channel is now always going to go out that stage announce out port. Unfortunately, we don't have that for the main station because when we developed the main station, we said we need it to work the same way as an analog party line system. And so that's how that worked. You had to hit the stage announce. When we did the remote station, we said, hey, we could do it a little bit better. So if you want that functionality, you would have to use the remote station. But if you do have an open 4-wire port on the main station, basically stage announce out is just the talk path of a 4-wire. So you could link it that way if you needed to.
That's great.
Okay.
So just a little housekeeping, Brian. I'll be emailing the winners of those prizes after the webinar. I'll send you an email directly telling you that you won. So I just wanted to throw that out there to make sure that you knew you would be getting your prizes.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Vic. We do have a couple more questions here. So Frank, I'll ask you this one. Does HelixNet work over in-house Ethernet network with QoS, or should it only be used with dedicated switches?
It can be done in either way. So HelixNet is a very just open IP. It really didn't do any special protocols or anything like that. So it can run on any type of network. So if you do have just an existing network, it will work fine on there. If you want to run it on a dedicated network, you can do that as well. But yeah, it can work on either.
That's great. And another network question here. John asks, can you touch on bridging the system into a Dante network?
So really for ClearCom, the only thing that we have that's Dante currently requires you to go up to our matrix system. You'd have to go to a large scale matrix. We have a 64 port Dante card. If you wanted to go into Dante, you could go out 4-wire from ClearCom. Oddnet makes a lot of great little small boxes there, or any other company does too as well. But ClearCom currently doesn't have anything that is specific for HelixNet LQ or even FreeSpeak 2 to bring the channels into Dante.
Yeah, it's great. I know Studio Technologies makes a nice little Dante conversion box for analog Partyline.
Yeah, so that's the best way to kind of go out that. You just have to use one of your 4-wire or 2-wire ports, and then you could go that way.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, I think we'll probably wrap up here. So Frank and Vic, thank you for your time here. We really appreciate it.
So thank you for having us. I hope we get to do this again. This has been fun for me, at least.
Yeah, that's great. We appreciate your setup out there in California. So for everyone, let me just share my screen here. Yeah, thanks again for Frank and Vic. Also, thank you, Mo, for your time here. We also want to thank Matt Collera, who's with the TC Furlong team that's been helping us facilitating the technical side of today's webinar. For everyone that's heading out of the webinar, there will be a brief exit survey when you leave. Feel free to drop any questions there, as well as if you have any questions, you can email us at sales@tcfurlong.com. If it's something that we can answer, we can help you out. If not, we'll get Frank or Vic involved for a more technical question. But thank you for everyone for coming. As we said, we're going to hopefully post this on YouTube within the next day or so, and we will send a link out, and feel free to share with anyone. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you. Take care.